And then this is what it looks like when you're finished. I love it because it just folds right in and covers the baby to keep the baby warm. And on the thicker one, I didn't use a ribbon. I didn't really need to. If you love her beautiful dress, this is my Rainbow Ripple Dreams dress. I also have a video tutorial for the beautiful bonnet and the baby shoes to go with it. This one has a little bow on it. So I just wanted to show you what the sweater looks like. And it turned out really nice. I love how I didn't put a ribbon on the thicker one because it just folds right across. There's plenty of room for the arm to fit through on both sides. And this baby doll fits 3 to 6 months size baby clothes. So it's like having a baby blanket built in that you can just wrap around the baby to keep the baby warm. It's really nice. This is what it looks like on the back. There's plenty of room for the arm, again, the arm opening. If you like this tiny tulip jacket sweater, I ended up using 3 skeins of this Buttercream Luxe Craft alpaca. It's not full alpaca yarn. It's 80% acrylic and 20% alpaca. And then this is how much I had left over of the 3rd skein. For this crochet project, you're going to need your 6mm crochet hook, as well as a tapestry needle or darning needle, and a pair of scissors. You'll also need a ribbon. I used Merchant 41 decorative trim pink ribbon. It has like a glittery pink look to it. And the size is a 1/2 inch by 3 yards. You're also going to need some stitch markers. This is my stitch marker case that I got from Pastiche Accessories on Etsy. I just love her work. And these are all stitch markers that I got from her as well. So if you're not able to handle the small clasp with your fingers, you can always use a safety pin instead as a stitch marker. They work great too. The yarn that I chose is Buttercream Luxe Craft Alpaca. It's actually an 80% acrylic and a 20% alpaca yarn. It's really soft. It's also a super bulky 6 yarn, and the recommended hook is actually a 10mm, but I'm going to be using a 6mm, and this is how much yarn that comes in a skein. The color is pale pink. We're going to start with the bottom panel of the sweater first. So you're going to take your yarn and you're going to fold it over on itself to form a loop. Take your crochet hook, go right through the loop, hold the base of the loop with your middle finger and your thumb. And then you're just going to yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through the loop for a slip knot. Go ahead and cinch that knot down and then cinch the loop around your crochet hook. And to make a chain, I'm just going to show 4 of them on video tutorial. You're going to yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through the loop for 1, 2, 3, 4. So for the bottom panel, my starting chain was 65, and the measurement is 22 inches. And if you're changing the size, use a multiple of 4 plus 1. Then you're going to want to make a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So count back 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the 4th chain from the hook you're going to make a double crochet. So just yarn over, go into the 4th chain from the hook, bring up a loop, complete a double crochet, then make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch, then you're going to do a 5 chain picot stitch. So you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slip stitch into the bottom. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to slip stitch beneath the 5 chain, the stitch beneath the 5 chain picot, so just under it. Yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and bring the yarn through both loops on the hook to complete a picot stitch. Then you're going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So yarn over, go into the same stitch, bring up a loop, complete a double crochet, and then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you just completed your first tiny tulip stitch. So now you want to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then make a tiny tulip into the 4th stitch. So you just yarn over, go into that 4th stitch, bring up a loop, make a double crochet, make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch. Then you're going to make a chain 5 picot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slip stitch into the stitch just below the first chain that you made. Then you're going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch to complete your tiny tulip. And you're going to repeat this all the way across. So you're going to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then make a tiny tulip into the 4th. So you're going to make a double crochet, make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch, then you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then make the picot, chain 5 picot. You're going to slip stitch into the stitch just beneath the first chain that you made. Then you're going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And you're going to repeat this pattern all the way across. And this is what it should look like when you're finished with a tiny tulip. If you like the other sweater that I used, the yarn is Kai, has 308 yards in a skein. It has a free pattern included, but it's just a half double crochet baby blanket. It's really cute though. They used a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. Here's some information about washing. The color that I used is Puzzle, and it recommends a 5 millimeter hook, which is what I'm going to use. It's a light 3 yarn, and it's by Loops and Threads. If you used Loops and Threads Kai style yarn with the 5 millimeter, I ended up with a chain of 85, and it also measured 22 inches. So you can see the different sizes with the tulips compared to the chunky yarn and the Kai yarn. And I really love the Kai yarn look of it. And they're the same size, so 22 inches for both of them, but the number of tulips will be different. So for the chunky, I only have 16 tulips, and for the Kai yarn, I have 21 tulips. So 21 tulips and 16 for the chunky, but they both measure 22 inches. And for both of them, I ended with a tulip, and I had 1 remaining stitch. And in the 1 remaining stitch, you just place a double crochet stitch. So a single double crochet into the last stitch. Now, after you finish the last double crochet into the last stitch, you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then turn your work. and you're going to make 2 double crochet into the same stitch. Just yarn over, go into the same stitch and make 2 double crochet. There's 1 and 2. Then you're going to skip the tiny tulip from the previous row, and you're going to make a tiny tulip into the space between the 2 tiny tulips. So you just yarn over, go into that space, bring up a loop, make a double crochet, and then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same space. Then you're going to chain 5 for your picot, and then slip stitch into the base or just beneath the first chain 1 of your picot stitch, and slip stitch to form your picot, and then make 2 more double crochet into the same space to complete your tiny tulip. And then this is what it looks like. Then you're going to skip the next tiny tulip and then into the space between the tiny tulips you're going to make a double crochet, and then you're going to repeat. So you're going to make your tiny tulip. So there's 1 double crochet. Make another double crochet for 2 double crochet. Then your chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you're going to make a slip stitch into the base of your chain 5 picot stitch. Then you're going to make 2 more double crochet. You're going to repeat that pattern all the way across. This is how my work looks with the chunky yarn. And I have my last tiny tulip. You're going to skip over the last tiny tulip, and the double crochet stitch on the end, you're going to make 3 double crochet stitches into the top stitch of that last double crochet stitch. So go into that top stitch, make your double crochet, and then make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So this is what it looks like with the chunky yarn on the end, and then this is what it looks like with the Kai yarn. So you should have, after this second row, you should have 1 less tiny tulip than you did for the previous row. So with the chunky yarn, I have 15 tiny tulips, and with the Kai yarn, I have 20 tiny tulips. So now we're going to move up to the 3rd row. So you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then turn your work. And then you're going to skip 2 double crochet from the previous row. So you have these 2 double crochet, and then you have the space before the tiny tulip. In the space before the tiny tulip is where you're going to be making your tiny tulip for the 3rd row, the first one. So you're going to go make a double crochet into that space and make a double crochet. You're going to be making 2 double crochet, then you chain 5, and then you're going to slip stitch into the base just under the chain 1 of the chain 5 picot. Then you're going to make 2 double crochet into the same space to complete your tiny tulip. And then you're just going to repeat across. You're going to go into the space between the 2 tiny tulips. So here's 1 and here's 1, and you're going to go in the space in between. So you just move the picot stitch from the previous row out of the way to make your tiny tulip. So I'll make one more with you and then I'll let you finish. So in the space between each of your tiny tulips is where you're going to be making your new tiny tulip for the row. So now when you reach the end, you're going to make your last tiny tulip in the space right before the 3 double crochet on the end. You're going to skip over 2 double crochet and then make a double crochet into the top stitch of that last double crochet on the end. So now you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn your work. And then you're just going to repeat what you did for rows 2 and 3 until you reach a measurement of 6.5 inches. So I'm going to repeat rows 2 and 3 one more time so you can remember how to do it. So we just finished our chain 3 and we just turned our work. So now you're going to make 2 double crochet into the same stitch. Then you're going to skip over the tiny tulip, and then in the space between the 2 tiny tulips from the previous row, you're going to make a tiny tulip. Yep. Let's chain 3, 4. Oh my goodness. My yarn is not pull from the middle. They make a lot of yarn that's not pull from the middle, which I don't like. So now I have a chain 5. I'm going to make a slip stitch into the base just under the chain 5, just like we've done for all the other tiny tulips, and then 2 double crochet into the same space to finish my tiny tulip. And then you're just going to repeat your tiny tulips all the way across and then come back. So this is how my work looks so far. It's turning out really pretty. And then I have my last tiny tulip, and then I have the double crochet stitch on the end. You're going to skip over the tiny tulip, and in the top stitch of that last double crochet from the previous row, you're going to make 3 double crochet into the same stitch. Then you're ready to move up to the next row. So you just chain 3, 1, 2, 3, turn your work, and now you're going to start with the same pattern that you did for row 3. Remember, you're alternating the pattern row 2 and row 3 until your length measures 6.5 inches. So far we only have about, let's see, each of these squares on my board here is about 1 inch. So about 3 inches so far. So now you can see that in the previous row I have my 3 double crochet. So I'm going to skip 2 and then work a tiny tulip into the first space. So that's how you're going to be working. You're going to alternate the same pattern from row 2 and row 3 until your length measures 6.5 inches. I'll just finish this tulip with you. 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's that simple. And again, this is the bottom panel. So we're making the bottom panel. And then you just skip the next tiny tulip and make a tiny tulip in the space. So go ahead, finish until you have a length of 6.5 inches and then come back. So now I have the bottom panel finished in both yarn styles, the thicker yarn style and then the thinner yarn style. And you just want to measure it and make sure it's about 6.5 inches. And I went from the top, one of the tiny tulips, to the bottom, and it's about 6.5 inches. And I get the same thing, same measurement for the thinner yarn style. So about 6.5 inches in height. So the other thing that I wanted to point out, which you probably already figured out, and it's really important so you don't have to frog your work, you'll have a single crochet for one row, and then the next row will have 3, next row 1, next row 3. So you see how it's alternating for each row. So if you made them correctly, the rows correctly, that's how you can keep track of whether it's a 1 double crochet or 3 double crochet. And I'll just show you on the other one as well. So here you can see you start with 1 double crochet on the end, then you have 3 double crochet, 1 double crochet, 3 double crochet. And that will help keep a straight edge for you if you made it correctly. So after you have a measurement of 6.5 inches in height, then you don't want to finish off. We're going to place our stitch markers. If you don't have stitch markers, these are my stitch markers, then you can just use a scrap of yarn instead, but the stitch markers are a little bit more fun. So now take your crochet work and place it so that the wrong side is facing up. And when you fold the right side and the left side to meet in the middle, you can see that this is the right front panel on video tutorial and the left front panel on video tutorial. And for mine, I placed my stitch marker. I counted 5 petals in. So here is my first petal, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and just after the 5th petal I placed my stitch marker. And I repeated it on the other side. So I counted 5 petals in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I placed my stitch marker. So this will be the back, and then when you fold in, you have the right side and the left side. So now I'm just going to show you, this is where the stitch marker is, and this is the back of the sweater, and then this is one of the side panels. So this is the bottom of the sweater that we just finished, and you're going to be joining, actually you didn't finish off, so when you finished the last row and after you placed your stitch markers, you're going to start with, if you had the previous row with 3 double crochet, then you would start with a chain of 3 for 1 double crochet, and then make your tiny tulips across. Let me find the right row. So here I started the row with 1 double crochet because the previous row had 3 double crochets. I made my tiny tulips across, and then when you reach the stitch marker, you're going to make 1 double crochet into the same space as the stitch marker, and you're only going to make 1 double crochet because you started the row with 1 double crochet. Then you're going to move up to the next row. The next row will have 3 double crochet because the previous row was 1 double crochet, and then you just repeat the tiny tulips across and end the row with 3 double crochet. 1 double crochet to move up, end with 1 double crochet, next row is 3 double crochet, and you keep alternating until you reach a measurement of 3 to 3.5 inches for the front panel. And this is with my other style of yarn. Now with my other style of yarn, I started the row with 3 double crochet. So that means in the stitch marker stitch, I had 3 double crochet. And then when you move up to the next row, it would be 1, and then 3, and then 1, and then however many rows that you need to measure 3 to 3.5 inches. And you're always going to end on the stitch marker side. So you're going to end on the stitch marker side after you get your 3 to 3.5 inch measurement, and then we're going to start forming the neck. So now we ended, I have about approximately a 3.5 measurement for this front panel, and I ended the row here on the side of the stitch marker I mean. And now you're ready to form the neck. So now you can go ahead and place a stitch marker. So since I'm starting, I ended this row with 1 double crochet. That means I'm going to be starting the row with 3. 1, 2, 3 is a chain of 3. When you turn your work, you're going to be starting the row with 3 double crochet. So I'm on the side of the stitch marker. I've been alternating for the row 1 double crochet, 3 double crochet, 1, 3, 1, and now I'm on 3. And after I reached 3 to 3.5 inches, now I'm starting the neck. So I ended on the side of the stitch marker. And I'm starting with 3. So now, depending on whether you start with 1 double crochet for the neck row or 3 is where you're going to stop when forming the neck along the edge. So because I started this row with 3 double crochet, I'm going to be stopping in the stitch before the tiny tulip from the previous row. Now for my other style of yarn, I have about a 3-inch measurement from the stitch marker. I ended on the side of the stitch marker and I started with 1 double crochet because the previous row had 3 double crochet. So that means that my stitch marker is going to be in the space right before the 3 double crochet on the end. So now you just make your tiny tulips across, and when you reach the stitch marker space, so since I started this row with 3 double crochet, I'm going to stop in the space before the tiny tulip. So I have my stitch marker in that space, and I'm going to make 3 double crochet into that space. And the reason why I have 3 double crochet in that space is because I started the row with 3 double crochet. Then I'm ready to move up to the next row. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then turn my work. And then you can see how here's the edge of the front panel, and you're forming the neck. So you have a little space or curve where you're forming the neck. So now you're ready to make your next row. So because the previous row had 3 double crochet, I'm only going to have 1 double crochet to start, and then I'm going to make my tiny tulip in the space after the 2 double crochet from the previous row. So with the other style of yarn, it also measures about 3 inches. Again, this is the stitch marker with the back. This is the back of the sweater, and then this is the side panel, and then this is the front panel here, and it's about 3 inches. And now I'm ready for the neck panel, and remember you end on the side of the stitch marker, and then you're going to place your stitch marker for the neck panel row. And if you start with 1 double crochet And again, you're still alternating. Because I ended with 3 double crochet on the previous row, I need 1 double crochet to start for this one. And that means that my stitch marker is going to go into the space just after the tiny tulip. So now you can see how I made my tiny tulips and I reached my stitch marker. So I started the row with 1 double crochet, so I'm going to end the row with 1 double crochet in the space with my stitch marker. And then I'm ready to move up to the next row. So chain 3, turn my work, and again, because I started the previous row with 1 double crochet, I'm going to start this row with 3 total double crochet. Then you can just repeat, alternating the 3 double crochet, 1 double crochet, 3 double crochet, 1 double crochet all the way until you reach approximately 3 to 3.5 inches from the stitch marker. And then I ended on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off when I reach my 3 to 3.5 inches. Just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and just bring enough yarn through to bury into your work. And so now I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So now here is the back panel, and then this is the side panel. And then this is where we formed the neck panel. So I'm going to turn this over. So I have the wrong side facing up. And then here are my 2 stitch markers for the back panel. And we finished 1 front panel. So I'm going to fold it over. So you can see, so here will be the other front panel. This is the other stitch marker we'll fold in. So now I have the right sides of the front panels, and then here is the back panel. And then we just finished the neck panel portion of the front panel. So now you're going to repeat the same process that you made this front panel for the other side. I just wanted to show you with the other yarn. So here is the back panel, and here are the stitch markers for the back panel. And I finished one of the front panels, so I'm going to fold it in so that you can see that I have the neck panel completed, and it's about 3 inches. It's about 3 inches, so 3 to 3.5 inches. And then you can see that I have 1 front panel complete. So now you just have to make the other front panel the exact same way, except remember that the neck panel is always on the side for the front edge of the sweater when you fold it in. So don't make the mistake of making the front panel, neck portion of the front panel towards the back of the sweater. You don't want that. When you fold it over so that the right side is showing, that curved portion for the neck panel should be on towards the edge of the opening. So now I'm going to make my other front panel. This is my back stitch marker for the back of the sweater. So I'm going to join in the top stitch of the double crochet. Let me find the top stitch on the end of the sweater. So you want to take your yarn and join in that top stitch. Make sure you leave a little bit of a loose yarn end for burying into your work. Then you can chain 3. 1, oops, sorry about that. So top stitch, joined my yarn, chain 3. So here's the 3 double crochet from the previous row, and then that means I'm going to start with 1 double crochet. So I'm going to skip over the 2 double crochet from the previous row, and I'm going to bury my loose yarn end as I crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, go into that space, go behind the loose yarn end to make my petal, my tiny tulip. So now I finished my last tiny tulip and I reached my stitch marker. So because I started this row with 1 double crochet, I'm going to end the row with 1 double crochet in the stitch with my stitch marker. Then you can move up to the next row, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, turn your work. And because the previous row was started with 1 double crochet, you're going to start this row with 3. So now you just continue the same way that you made the other side front panel. You're going to repeat the same with the front panel on the opposite side. So I wanted to show you what it looks like. So here I have the neck formed on the one side, and you can see how you have a straight opening on the back. So the 2 sides will fold in. And then you have your neck. If you did it correctly, you should have your neck formation, and they should be equal. So I just want to show you one trick that I used when making my neck portion. And I'm going to show you with my other yarn style sweater. So I finished the one side, and I actually used a stitch marker in the space where I wanted to create the indentation for the neck portion. And on the other side, I ended up making the same amount of rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, to measure about 3 inches, about 3 to 3.5 inches. And then I went ahead and finished off. Actually, I didn't finish off. I ended on the side where I want to form the neck. So remember, you don't want to make the neck portion where you have the back. You want to have it on the edge that folds in. So what I did to get in the area where I want to create my neck portion, which will be here, so I went ahead and left a tiny tulip on this side, and then on the other side I went after the tiny tulip. But you could make it here if you want them both to have one tiny tulip in place. So that's an option that you can use when you're creating your neck portion. So to get to the space where I want to create my neck portion, you can slip stitch if you need to. So you just go into the next stitch, yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and bring the yarn through both loops. And then you just make slip stitches until you get to the first tiny tulip, and then go behind the tiny tulip's head. So fold it down and then go behind the tiny tulip and then just make your slip stitch until you get to the space where you want to create the neck portion, or the row for the neck portion. Then you can just make a slip stitch into that space, and then you're going to want to look at the row before. So go to the end of the row, and the previous row has 3 double crochet. So you know that this row should end with 1 double crochet. So I'm going to start this row with 1 double crochet. So I just chain 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and make my tulip into the same space. So I'm going to yarn over, go into the same space, and then just make my tulip. So that's an option that you can have when forming the neck. So there's many different ways. As long as you have an indentation and then the amount of space with the indentation is the same on both sides, then you just finish the row like normal, just like you did for the other side. And you're going to end the row into the top stitch of the double crochet that you made before your tiny tulip. So here you can see how I moved up to the next row, and then I just ended in the double crochet stitch on the end just before the tulip stitch. And then of course, since I had 1 double crochet on the previous row, this row would end with 3 double crochet. And then I just move up to the next row, turn my work, and then I'm ready to crochet back the same way. And again, this top neck portion is also 3 to 3.5 inches in height. So now this is what it looks like on this side. So you can see that I have a little bit of an opening for the neck here. It's about 1 to 1.5 inches, and I have a tiny tulip from the previous row, and about 3 to 3.5 inches for this top portion for the neck. You can see I have a straight edge towards the back, and then on the opposite side it's the same thing, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, about 3 to 3.5 inches for the top part. And then I have the wrong side facing up. Here's the back part, and then you fold over the front flap. So this is the right front flap on video, and here's the left front flap on video. And you can see how the two edges meet up like they're supposed to, and it forms like a little neck portion, which is what you want, and they should be the same size. And now I have the right side. This is the wrong side, and then when I fold it together I have the right side. So this is the front of the sweater, and on the back, this is the back portion that we're going to be finishing up after we finish the arms, the sleeves. So this is what the sleeve looks like, and this is the opening where the hand will come out, or arm, and then this is the portion that will attach to the outfit or the sweater. So I start with this opening that attaches to the sweater, and the diameter for this is 3 inches. So you can make the opening 3 to 4 inches, and it will depend on your starting chain. And it will also depend on the style of yarn that you're using. So I'll show you what my starting chain is and what the measurement is to create a 3-inch, but you could, if you want to make it a little bit larger, then you would create your chain so that you would get the 4-inch size. So you're going to take whatever yarn that you're using, and you're going to fold it over on itself to form a loop. Hold the base of the loop with your middle finger and your thumb. Yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through the loop for a slip knot. Go ahead and cinch that knot down and cinch the loop around your crochet hook. So I'm just going to show you 4 chains on video tutorial, and when I come back I'll show you what the size of my chain is to get a 3-inch diameter. So you just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through the loop for 1, 2, 3, 4. So for mine, I made a chain of 40, and the measurement for this chain is 13 inches. So for a 3-inch diameter like mine, my starting chain with this style yarn is a chain of 40. So your chain may change depending on the yarn style that you're using. So I'm giving you the measurement, and the measurement for this is 13 inches. So then once you have your starting chain size, we're going to go ahead and make the first row. So you're going to make a double crochet into the 6th chain from the hook. So count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make your double crochet into the 6th chain. Then you're going to make one more double crochet into the same stitch. Then you're going to make your chain 5 picot stitch. So just chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slip stitch into the first chain, or actually right below the chain. Either one will work. Then just yarn over and pull the yarn through both loops on the hook for a picot, chain 5 picot, and then make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch to finish your tiny tulip, your first tiny tulip. Then you're going to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then make another tiny tulip into the 4th stitch. And then you're going to repeat that pattern all the way across. So make your tiny tulip, skip 3 stitches, and make another tiny tulip, and keep repeating that all the way across. So this is what mine looks like when I'm finished. Then just skip any remaining stitches on the end and make a double crochet into the last stitch on the end. Then you're going to bring the 2 ends of the pieces together. Make sure that it's not twisted. And then just bring the 2 ends together. And again, you want to make sure it's not twisted. And then in the top stitch of that first chain 3 on the end, so you have 3 chains on the end, you want to go into that top stitch and then make your slip stitch. Then you're going to set your work down and get your tapestry needle to join the bottom. So then you just take and sew the bottom edge together to form a ring. And then I just like to make sure it's knotted well, and then I can vary it later. So now, after you've joined it into a ring, you want to make sure that the work is facing you as you crochet. Go ahead and chain 3. Then make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. Then you're going to skip over the first tiny tulip from the previous row and then make a tiny tulip into the space between the 2 tiny tulips from the previous row. And you're going to repeat this all the way around back to where you started. So now I'm back to where I started. So I'm going to make a slip stitch into the top stitch of that first chain 3 that we made for the round. Just yarn over and pull the yarn through both loops on the hook. Then, just like we did before, we're going to alternate. So we started the previous round with 3 double crochet. So for this next round, we're going to make 1 double crochet. So you just chain 3, and then that will count as your first double crochet for this round. And I'm making mine about 3 inches, but you can make your sleeve as long or as short as you want. So this will be my last round for mine with this thicker yarn, but you may need more rounds depending on what style of yarn that you use. So I'm going to skip over the first 2 double crochet and make my tiny tulip just like we've done in the past. And then you're just going to skip over, after the tiny tulip, skip over the next one and repeat in the space in between. So repeat your tiny tulips all the way around, back to where you started. So then I made my last picot tiny tulip, and I skipped over the tiny tulip from the previous round and just made a slip stitch. into the top stitch of that first double crochet that I made. Then you can chain 1. Let's see, I made that into the wrong one. Let me double check that one. Oh, there we go. Yep, this was the top chain. Go ahead and make your slip stitch. Then you can chain 1, and then you're going to make 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Go ahead and fold down the picot stitch when you reach it. Skip over the picot stitch and then make a single crochet into each of the stitches until you reach the next picot stitch. And then you fold it down and repeat all the way around. Then, when you reach the beginning, just make a slip stitch into the first single crochet that you made. Just yarn over and pull the yarn through both loops for a slip stitch. So now, you want to determine the size that you want for the opening. So, whatever size opening that you have for one sleeve, you need to make sure that you have for the other sleeve. So for mine, I had 3 inches diameter for the one sleeve, and now I have 3 inches diameter for the other sleeve. Now if you need to decrease the stitches in the round, you need to single crochet 2 stitches together. I'm just going to show you that stitch, even though I'm not going to put any single crochet 2 stitches together for this one, because I like the size that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. Now if you like the stitches that you have, the measurement, then you just make 1 single crochet in every stitch around. Now if you want to decrease the stitches to make it smaller, then you're going to single crochet 2 stitches together. And you just make how many single crochet 2 stitches together that you need, and you evenly space them around the armhole. So you don't have one side smaller than the other. You evenly space it around. So for mine, I'm just making 1 single crochet in every stitch around because I'm happy with the size of mine. Now you want to make sure that you put a stitch marker where you start, and you can use a scrap of yarn if you don't have any stitch markers. That way you remember where you started. And then you just make 1 more round of 1 single crochet in every stitch around. Now like I said, if you want to decrease a stitch, I'm going to show you how to single crochet 2 stitches together. So you just go right into the next stitch, bring up a loop, 2 loops on the hook, go into the next stitch, bring up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through all 3 for a decrease stitch. And that will decrease your stitch by 1. So for mine, I'm just making 1 single crochet, but that's how you would decrease your stitch by 1. And those are the stitches that you evenly space in the round if you want to make your hole slightly smaller. So like I said, my opening matches the opening for the other one, so I'm keeping it the same size, and I'm making 1 single crochet in every stitch around. So now I'm back to where I started. I already removed my stitch marker. I'm going to make a slip stitch into the next stitch over. So I just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and bring the yarn through. Both loops on the hook. Then you can go ahead and finish off. Just yarn over and pull enough yarn through to help sew the sleeve onto the sweater. So now what we're going to do is, so the long end that you left for sewing will be on the side that you sew to the sweater. Now you're going to go back to where we left off on the opposite opening on the same sleeve, and then you're going to join your yarn right where you have the loose yarn end. on the opposite side, so just in the stitch before the loose yarn end, go ahead and join your yarn on the opposite side, and you can decide if you want to use the same color or you want to have fun and change colors. I'm going to bury my loose yarn ends as I crochet, so I'm going to lay them right down in the round as I crochet. Then I'm going to make a chain of 1. Then my first stitch is a tiny tulip, the bottom of the tiny tulip, and you see how you have a little small opening, and then you have your little space here under the chain 3, the skipped 3 from when we skipped those 3 spaces. You're going to be working into the space underneath that. So under each of the tiny tulips you have the small hole, put your crochet hook in there and make 1 single crochet. And then when you reach the skipped 3 space, go in that space and make 3 single crochet. I'm sorry, 2 single crochet. So 2 single crochet into the chain 3 space. Under the chain 3 space, 1 single crochet into the space under the tiny tulip. And then you can take and cut your loose yarn ends because they're nice and buried. Get them out of the way. So again, you can see the openings. The larger opening has 2 single crochet, 1 single crochet, 2 single crochet, and you repeat that all the way around. Now I finished my single crochet into my last tiny tulip, and then I have a few spaces here before I get back to where I started. So I'm just going to single crochet 2 stitches together just 1 time, and that will bring me to where I started. And then I'm going to make a slip stitch into the first chain 1 that I made, and then you want to check your opening. So you want to make sure that the opening that you have for both sleeves are the same. So I have 3 inches diameter for both, so I'm happy with the stitch count. So I go by measurement because depending on the yarn, your stitch count will vary. So you want to make sure that however you make one sleeve, your other sleeve should be the same. So if you need to make it slightly smaller, you know how to make the decrease stitch or single crochet 2 stitches together. So now I'm going to make 1 more round, and this time I'm just going to use one of my scraps of yarn to help me keep track of the yarn. So you can use your stitch marker or one of your scraps of yarn, then chain 1, and then just make 1 round of 1 single crochet in every stitch around. Then when you reach where you started, just make a slip stitch into that stitch, and then go ahead and finish off. Just yarn over and just pull enough yarn through to bury into your work. So now we're going to bury the loose yarn end. So now just get your tapestry needle, place the loose yarn end onto the tapestry needle, and you want to weave the loose yarn end through the wrong side of the work. And I usually go 2 different directions, making sure that it's nice and buried. Then you can go ahead and trim it. So now you can go ahead and make both your sleeves. Just make sure that you make them both the same size. So now you can set the sleeves aside while we make the back panel. So now take the main sweater and place it in front of you so that the right side is facing up. So I have the one side panel to the left and the one side panel to the right. So now we're going to be working in the rectangular space in the back of the sweater. So then you're going to take and join into this space that's between the side panel and the first tiny tulip on the back. So you just take your yarn and then join in that space. Go ahead and tie a knot. Then you're going to go ahead and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then you're going to make 2 double crochet into the same space. Then you're going to go ahead, and if you buried your loose yarn end, go ahead and trim that. And then you're going to skip over. Now remember, we started this row on the back with 3 double crochet, so you're going to end this row with 3 double crochet. So skip over the tiny tulip, and in the space below, you're going to make a tiny tulip. So all the way across. When you reach the end, which is where you have the space before the front panel, come back and I'll show you what to do next. So now I reached the other front panel and I have the space right before the front panel. So I know that I started this back row with 3 double crochet. So I'm going to finish this back row, first row on the back, with 3 double crochet. Then I'm going to move up to the second row for the back panel. So I'm going to chain 3, turn my work, and now I know that I started this row with the previous row with 3 double crochet, so this second row for the back panel is going to be only 1 double crochet. So this first chain 3 counts as the first double crochet, and then I make my tiny tulip. And then you just keep repeating this row, and you know that you started this row with 1 double crochet, so you're going to end this row with 1 double crochet. So now I reached the end, and I'm going to make a double crochet into the top stitch of the last stitch for the row. And you're going to keep repeating the rows for the back panel. So I'm going to chain 3. Lost the opening. 2, 3, and then turn your work. And remember, you're alternating. I started the row with 3 double crochet. The second row had 1, so this one will have 3. And you just keep repeating these rows until the back panel is level, and you'll have this gap here. This is where the sleeve is going to go. And you keep repeating the rows until you're level with the top of the front panel on both sides. So you're going to have a free back panel that's going to fold up right up the back and be level with both front panel of the sweater. And then when you finish your last row, go ahead and finish off. Just yarn over and just pull enough yarn through to bury into your work. And then you have your back flap. So here you can see the back flap, and then here is the front panel on one side, and you can see the opening for sewing the sleeve into, and then this is the other side of it, so you should have a straight edge. So now we're ready to sew the arm panels or arm sleeves in place. So now go ahead and take your sweater, and you want to have the wrong side facing up. And then you're going to take This is the back panel that we just finished, and then you have the little V opening that's created. This is where we're going to sew the arm sleeve into, and then this side is where you have your front panel. So again, I have the wrong side facing up. Then you're going to take your sleeve and you want to have the opening where you have your long end that you left for sewing, and you're going to place it right into the V, the bottom of the V. And so now I have the right sides together. So the right sides are together and the wrong side is facing me. And then you're going to take your tapestry needle for sewing and place it right onto the long end that you left for sewing. So now we're going to sew the sleeves in place. So you're going to take the main portion of the sweater and make sure that you have the wrong side facing up. So here is the back panel we just finished. Here's the V that we created, and then here is the front panel. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take the loose yarn end that you have at the top and then just join it to the opposite side. So just tie a knot with that loose yarn end. Or if you don't have a loose yarn end or you buried the loose yarn end, just use a safety pin or something to hold the two ends together. Now you're ready to sew the sleeve in place. So now you want to take your sleeve and you're going to grab the side that has the long end that you left for sewing, and I lined up that end with the bottom of the V, and you're going to be sewing all around the sleeve opening. So you can see how it lines up in here. So I have the right sides together and the wrong side is facing me. So when you open it up, the right side will be showing. So that's how you want to position your sleeve in place. And then just get your tapestry needle ready on the long end that you left for sewing. And then you're just going to take and grab a stitch on the main portion of the sweater. And if you have any tiny tulips, they go towards the right side. And then you just grab the stitch on the sweater and a stitch on the sleeve, and then you just go and sew all the way around until the sleeve is held in place. Then you can bury any loose yarn ends. Then you have your opening. This is what it looks like on the right side. Looks beautiful. So then you just repeat the process. This is the wrong side. This is the right side. Repeat the same process for the other sleeve. So now you can take and turn the work inside out so that the wrong side is facing you. And we're going to sew the shoulder seams together. So then just kind of fold the work across. So now I have the wrong side facing me. You want to fold any tulips in towards the right side. Take your tapestry needle with the same colored yarn, and here I have the sleeve, and here's the shoulder seam, and I'm only going to sew right next to the shoulder. You can see how I'm grabbing both stitches. Make sure you leave enough of a loose yarn end for burying into the work. And then I'm just going to sew about an inch on both sides. So about an inch on both sides, inch to inch and a half. And then you're just going to tie a knot. and bury the loose yarn ends. So you repeat the same thing on the other side. Then you can just turn it so the right side is facing you, and then this is what it looks like when you're finished. I love it because it just folds right in and covers the baby to keep the baby warm.